The cabin had been Ethan Cole's dream for as long as he could remember. A small retreat, nestled deep in the pines on the edge of Pinecrest Lake, with a wide porch that looked out over the water. He'd saved for nearly a decade, working endless shifts at the auto shop, slowly scraping together enough to buy a little piece of freedom when he finally moved in. He thought he'd found peace. No city noise, no bosses breathing down his neck, just the soft rush of wind through the trees and the ripple of the lake. There was just one problem. The Homeowners Association, and more specifically Karen Whitmore, its president. Karen was the kind of woman who had been running things since high school and never stopped. She had a helmet of blonde hair, designer sunglasses, and a clipboard that might as well have been surgically attached to her arm. She lived 3 houses down from Ethan's cabin in a massive 3-story chalet that screamed old money. From the moment Ethan moved in, she treated him like a squatter. "Mr. Cole," she would say in her shrill nasal voice, "your firewood stack is not within regulation height. I'll have to fine you. Or, that canoe on your dock isn't an HOA-approved color. Bright red attracts insects. I'll have to fine you." It seemed every week there was a new complaint. A new attempt to remind him who really ran Pinecrest Lake. At first, Ethan ignored her. He'd grown up dealing with bullies. Silence was his weapon, but Karen wasn't the type to get bored and move on. If anything, ignoring her just made her try harder. One morning, Ethan came out to find a paper taped to his front door. "Notice Pinecrest HOA will be hosting an event for 100 guests at your cabin on June 15th. As a member of this community, we appreciate your cooperation." Ethan frowned, reading it twice. He almost laughed until he realized it wasn't a joke. Karen had actually scheduled a massive party at his cabin, without asking, without permission. He stormed down the road to Karen's chalet. She was on the porch barking orders at landscapers. "Karen," Ethan said, holding up the notice. "What the hell is this?" She gave him a tight smile. "Oh, Ethan, don't be so dramatic. We've got the annual Pinecrest Gala coming up, and your cabin is just perfect for entertaining. Big porch, easy lake access, lots of space. I've already reserved it." "You can't just reserve my home," Ethan snapped. Karen tilted her head, condescending. "Technically, the common grounds extend to within 10 feet of the lake perimeter, which means your dock and porch are, well, let's say shad. Don't worry, I'll make sure your place is cleaned after. You won't even notice we were there." Ethan's jaw clenched. "The answer is no." Karen's smile vanished. "Excuse me." "No," he repeated, his voice hard. "This is my property. You and your 100 guests are not welcome." For a long moment, Karen just stared at him, like he was some particularly stupid animal. Then she laughed a cold, dismissive laugh. "Oh, Ethan," she said, shaking her head, "you'll find that in this community, saying no to me isn't really an option." And with that, she turned her back on him and resumed yelling at the landscapers. Ethan walked away, fists clenched, his blood boiling. That night, he sat on his porch, staring out at the lake. He thought about the party strangers trampling through his cabin, muddy shoes on his rugs, beer cans in the water, Karen smiling smugly while she treated his dream home like her personal clubhouse. No, he wouldn't allow it. If Karen thought he was just some pushover mechanic, she was about to learn otherwise. Ethan leaned back, a slow smile forming as a plan began to take shape. Ethan spent the next few days pacing his property, thinking he could call the sheriff, but the HOA had the local authorities wrapped around their little finger. Karen donated to every election, hosted every fundraiser. No deputy in this county would risk crossing her. He could confront her again, but words were useless. Karen didn't argue, she declared, and she always won because she believed no one would stand up to her. So Ethan decided he wouldn't argue, he wouldn't call, he'd build. The cabin sat at the end of a narrow road that wound through the woods. It was the only access point for vehicles. Everything else was too steep, too rocky, or too tangled with trees. If you controlled the road, you controlled the cabin. And Ethan was very good with his hands. He went into town and picked up steel beams, heavy-duty hinges, and a hydraulic motor. The clerk at the hardware store raised an eyebrow at the pile of equipment. "Big project, something like that," Ethan muttered back at the cabin. He got to work. He dug deep posts into the ground where the road narrowed. He welded the steel beams into a wide gate that could swing across the lane and lock in place. He ran wiring underground to a control box mounted discreetly near his porch for 3 days. He worked from sunrise to sundown. Sparks flew from his welding. Sweat stung his eyes, and his muscles ached, but he didn't stop. By the end of the week, the road was no longer just a road, it was a trap. When the gate swung shut, no car, no truck, no bus could pass, and best of all, it locked tight from the inside. The first test was almost too perfect. Karen herself showed up in her Lexus SUV, barreling down the lane like she owned it. Ethan was waiting on his porch, watching the hidden camera feed. The second her tires crossed the sensor, Ethan pressed the button. The steel gate swung shut across the road with a deep metallic clang. Karen slammed her brakes, barely stopping in time. Her sunglasses slid down her nose as she stared at the barrier in disbelief. She rolled down her window, screeching, "Ethan, what is the meaning of this?" Ethan strolled casually down the drive. "Private property. Can't have people trespassing. This is against HOA regulations. She barked. Funny, Ethan said, leaning on the gate. I checked. No rule about putting up a fence on your own land. As long as it's within my property line, I'm free to secure it. Guess what? It is. Karen's face flushed crimson. She smacked her palm against the steering wheel. This is outrageous. You will remove this immediately. Ethan grinned. No, Karen, I don't think I will. For a moment, they just stared at each other, the quiet hum of cicadas filling the silence. Finally, Karen hissed through clenched teeth. You'll regret this. Then she threw the SUV in reverse, spun around and sped back up the road. Ethan watched her go, then tapped the button. The gate swung open again, smooth as butter. He felt lighter than he had in weeks. For once he wasn't playing defense. He was ready. That evening, Ethan sat on his porch with a beer in hand. The sun set over Pinecrest Lake, painting the sky in orange and purple streaks. For the first time since moving here, he felt in control. But he knew Karen, she wasn't done. And if she thought a little gate was going to stop her big gala plans, she was in for the surprise of her life. Ethan leaned back, listening to the crickets and the soft splash of fish. Jumping in the lake, he almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Karen didn't take humiliation lightly. Within 24 hours of slamming her Lexus into reverse at Ethan's gate, she was firing off emails, making calls, and holding emergency board meetings. By the end of the week, Ethan's mailbox was overflowing with notices. Violation. #207, unauthorized gate installation. Violation number 208, excessive welding noise. Violation. #209, threatening behavior toward HOA president. Each came with a fine attached. $500 here, $750 there, all piling up to nearly $5,000. Ethan read them, chuckled, and tossed them straight into the trash. They could try to bury him in paper. He was used to grease, not ink. But Karen wasn't done. One evening, Ethan was working in his shed when he heard a knock at the door. He opened it to find Deputy Rollins' broad-shouldered mustache thick as a broom. "Evening, Ethan," Rollins said, glancing around awkwardly. "Got some complaints from the HOA about an illegal barricade." Ethan smirked. "Illegal, huh? You want to see my survey lines?" Rollins sighed. "Look, I don't want to be here, but you know how it is. Karen makes noise. I gotta check." Ethan showed him the deed, the property markers, the measurements. Rollins nodded, clearly annoyed at wasting his time. "All right. Looks like you're within your rights, but between you and me," he leaned in, "you poked the bear. She ain't gonna stop." Ethan shrugged. "Let her try." The date of the gala crept closer. Ethan could feel the storm brewing. He knew Karen wouldn't cancel. She'd already bragged about it too much. Flyers had gone out, invitations sent. Local politicians and donors were expecting champagne by the lake, all arranged by Karen Whitmore, Queen of Pinecrest, and Ethan. He had the perfect seat reserved. The morning of June 15th dawned bright and clear. Sunlight spilled through the pines, glittering off the lake. Ethan sat on his porch sipping coffee, watching as a line of vehicles snaked down the winding road. Catering vans, rental buses, SUVs packed with partygoers. Karen led the convoy in her Lexus, honking triumphantly like a general leading her troops. But when they rounded the final bend, they stopped dead. The gate. Ethan had reinforced it the night before, steel plates across the bars, double chains on the locks. It wasn't just a gate anymore. It was a wall. The first bus driver honked, confused. People leaned out of windows, craning to see why they weren't moving. Karen jumped out of her SUV, stomping toward the gate in heels that sank into the gravel. "Ethan," she shrieked, spotting him on the porch. "Open this gate now." Ethan raised his mug in a mock toast. "Morning, Karen. Beautiful day for a party. You don't understand." Karen was red-faced, practically shaking. "I have 100 guests here, important guests. You are ruining everything." "That's the idea," Ethan said calmly. Karen whirled on them, her fake smile plastered back in place. "Oh, don't you worry. Just a little misunderstanding. He'll let us through in a moment." But Ethan didn't move. He just leaned back in his chair, sipping his coffee, enjoying the show. Karen stormed up to the gate, gripping the bars with white-knuckled hands. "If you don't unlock this right now, I will have you arrested." Ethan chuckled. "Tried that already, didn't you?" Rollins wasn't impressed. A ripple of laughter spread through the crowd. Karen's face twisted. She wasn't just losing control, she was being humiliated. Karen's perfectly planned gala was unraveling before her eyes. The convoy of cars stretched down the road, engines idling, guests fanning themselves in the summer heat. Expensive dresses and suits peeked out of rolled-down windows. Confusion turned to irritation. A man in a tux leaned out of a limo. "Karen, are we having this party or not?" Karen's smile twitched. "Of course we are. This is just a minor hiccup. He'll open the gate any second." All eyes shifted to Ethan, sitting leisurely on his porch, boots propped on the railing, coffee steaming in his hand. He didn't so much as flinch. "Karen," another woman called, exasperated. "You said this was your property." Karen's jaw tightened. She strutted to the front, planting herself against the steel gate. Her voice cracked as she bellowed, "Ethan, let us in. These are important people. Do you know who you're embarrassing?" Ethan leaned forward, calm as ever. Looks like you're doing that just fine on your own. The crowd chuckled. Several phones were already out, recording. Karen's eyes darted, panic flickered for just a moment. The HOA president, the woman who had bullied dozens of neighbors into submission, was being filmed like a circus act. She slammed her palm against the bars. I'll sue you. You already tried fines. I threw them in the trash. I'll have you evicted. Ethan stood. Slowly, deliberately, he set down his mug and walked to the gate. Every eye followed him. Karen stepped back, uncertain for the first time. He stopped on the other side of the steel barrier, close enough that she could see the calm in his eyes. You claimed my cabin, Ethan said, voice low but carrying across the crowd. You invited 100 guests to my property. You tried to bury me in fake violations. You even called the cops on me, Karen sputtered. It's community property. The HOA has jurisdiction. Ethan pulled a folded piece of paper from his back pocket and held it up. Here's the deed. My land, my cabin, my rules, and all of you. He gestured at the line of cars are trespassing. The murmurs turned into full-on whispers. Guest frowned, looking at Karen with doubt. A woman in pearls leaned out of her Mercedes. Karen, you told us this was your estate. Yes. It practically is. Karen stammered. The HOA oversees. No, it doesn't. Ethan cut her off. The HOA doesn't own me, and it sure doesn't own this cabin. So, unless you're here by my invitation. He pointed down the road. You can leave. The silence was heavy. Guests shifted uncomfortably. Finally, someone in the back honked their horn, then another. One by one, engines revved. Cars began turning around, bumper to bumper, retreating up the narrow road. Karen spun, flailing her arms. Wait, no, don't. Listen to him. This is my gala. But the line was already breaking apart. Phones were out everywhere now. Guests filmed Karen, shouting, pleading, losing control. Her carefully constructed image of authority crumbled in real time. When the last car pulled away, the road was quiet again. Just Karen, standing in her designer heels, dust clinging to her once perfect dress. Ethan pressed the button. The gate swung open slowly, almost ceremonially. He stepped through, brushing past her. Your party's over, Karen. She whirled on him, eyes blazing, but no words came. For the first time, she looked small. Ethan walked back to his porch, sat down, and picked up his coffee again. He didn't even look back. Behind him, Karen's heels clicked frantically on the gravel as she stomped to her SUV and sped off, humiliated. That night, Ethan sat on the porch again. The lake shimmered under the moonlight. It was quiet, finally quiet, and the best part, the whole neighborhood had seen Karen lose. The HOA queen had been dethroned by a gate, a deed, and a man who refused to bow. Ethan smiled, sipping the last of his coffee. For the first time since moving in, the cabin truly felt like home. Karen didn't sleep that night, while Ethan sat on his porch in peace, savoring his hard-earned victory. She paced across her immaculate living room, heels clicking, on polished hardwood floors. The humiliation replayed in her mind like a broken record. Guests sneering, phones recording, cars pulling away one by one while Ethan sipped his coffee like he owned the world. Because he did, and that burned her more than anything. No one makes a fool out of me, she muttered, slamming her wineglass onto the counter. Red splattered across the marble like spilled blood. Karen pulled out her phone, her fingers flying. Karen texting HOA group chat. Emergency meeting tomorrow. Mandatory attendance. Ethan has violated our covenant agreement and must be dealt with immediately, within minutes. The replies flooded in. What did he do now? Karen, maybe you overstepped. Why was everyone filming you screaming at his gate? Her lip curled. Even her own board members were questioning her. Karen typed again. Forcefully. Karen, he has been illegally using his cabin for commercial purposes. We all saw the crowd of cars. This is grounds for heavy fines, potential foreclosure, necessary forced eviction. That last word made her smile. If she couldn't humiliate Ethan in public, she'd bury him in paperwork. The next morning, a manila envelope appeared on Ethan's doorstep. Notice of violation, unauthorized commercial activity, fine, $5,000. Ethan chuckled. He barely finished his morning coffee before the second envelope arrived. Notice of violation, unauthorized structure gate. Fine, $2,500. By lunchtime, there were 4 more. Noise complaints, landscaping violations, improper cabin maintenance, each one stacked neatly on his porch like a deck of cards. Ethan shook his head. He knew exactly whose hand was behind this. Karen, but what she didn't know, what she could never have guessed, was that Ethan had been preparing for this since day one. That evening, Ethan drove into town. Instead of hiring a lawyer, he went somewhere better, the county courthouse. He requested public records, HOA filings, budgets, board meeting minutes. It took a few days, but by the time he left, he carried a thick folder under his arm at home. Ethan laid everything out on the cabin's wooden table, and what he found made him grin. The HOA's funds, supposedly collected for community maintenance, had been mysteriously drained by tens of thousands of dollars. The board's signatures were there, But the expenses were vague: consulting fees, landscape enhancements, miscellaneous community needs. Except Ethan had been in the neighborhood long enough to know nothing had been enhanced. But Karen's home, her marble kitchen countertops, her backyard pool, her endless parties, every enhancement was sitting right inside her mansion. And Ethan now had the paperwork to prove it. 2 days later, Karen stood at the head of the HOA clubhouse, smug and composed. The board sat beside her, nervously shuffling papers. Residents filled the seats, whispers buzzing like angry bees. "Thank you all for coming," Karen began, voice syrupy sweet. "As you know, we've had incidents with our newest resident, Mr. Ethan Shaw. He's violated multiple HOA rules, and the fines are already stacking up. If he refuses to comply, we will pursue foreclosure." The crowd murmured. Karen raised her hands. "Please, this is about protecting our community standards. We can't have one man ignoring the rules we all live by." At that moment, the back doors opened. Ethan walked in, calm, confident, a thick folder in his hands. Karen stiffened. "You weren't invited." Ethan smirked. "It's a community meeting, right? Seems I'm part of the community." The audience chuckled. Karen's eyes narrowed. "Sit down, we'll address you when." "No," Ethan cut her off, stepping forward. He dropped the folder on the table with a thud. Papers spilled out full of numbers, signatures, and damning evidence. "Because tonight," Ethan said, voice echoing through the clubhouse, "we're going to talk about your violations." The room went silent. Karen's confident smile faltered. The silence in the clubhouse was heavy, like thunder waiting to break. Karen opened her mouth to regain control, but Ethan was already sliding papers across the long oak table. "Page 1, he said coolly. "A $15 consulting fee billed to the HOA's account, approved with your signature. Care to tell us what kind of consultant you hired?" Karen's jaw tightened. "That is private HOA business." Ethan raised a brow. "Funny, because county records show that same day you had a brand new swimming pool installed in your backyard." "Coincidence?" Gasps rippled through the room. Several board members leaned in, whispering frantically to each other. Ethan didn't stop. He flipped another sheet. "Page 2. A $7,500 charge listed as landscape enhancement. Yet, if you look around this community," he gestured out the clubhouse windows, "not one blade of grass looks different. But in your garden, Karen imported stone pathways, fresh sod, exotic plants, all installed the very same week." Someone from the crowd shouted, "She used our money for her yard." Karen's face flushed crimson. "That is a baseless accusation." Ethan leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough to make the room strain to hear. "Then maybe you can explain the $22,000 in miscellaneous maintenance last spring, when the only thing maintained was your kitchen renovation." The crowd exploded, shouts, outrage, phones raised, recording every second. Karen slammed her hand on the table. "Enough. This man is lying, fabricating." But Ethan pulled out the trump card. A glossy photo slid across the table. Karen herself, standing in her driveway, supervising workers unloading marble countertops, stamped with a date that matched the miscellaneous maintenance bill. The crowd roared, "You stole from us. Karen, how could you? You made us pay for your house upgrades." Board members shifted uncomfortably. One of them, a wiry man named Greg Finley, spoke. "Karen, is this true?" Karen stuttered. "No, of course not. He's twisting things. These expenses were necessary for the community." But no one believed her. Ethan stepped back, folding his arms. "I came here tonight because you tried to bury me in bogus fines. You thought you could push me out, but I play by the law, Karen, and the law doesn't look kindly on fraud." He held up a final document as ace in the hole, a formal complaint, already prepared for the county attorney. "Embezzlement, misuse of HOA funds. I was going to file it tomorrow, but if the board acts tonight, maybe I don't have to." Karen's face went pale. The board members exchanged frantic looks. Then Greg stood again, voice firm. "I motion to remove Karen Lewis as president of the HOA effective immediately." "Seconded." Another blurted. "All in favor?" A sea of hands shot up, nearly unanimous. Karen's chair screeched as she stood, eyes blazing with desperation. "You can't do this to me. I built this community. I am this community." But her voice was drowned out by the crowd, their chants growing louder. "Out, out, out." Phones caught every angle as Karen, trembling with rage, was escorted out of the clubhouse by 2 security officers the board hastily called in. Her reign was over. When the chaos settled, Greg turned to Ethan. "Mr. Shaw, I think we owe you an apology. From now on, things will be different around here." Ethan gave a small smile. "That's all I ever wanted." But deep down he knew this wasn't the last he'd see of Karen. A woman that petty, that vindictive, she wouldn't go down quietly for a few weeks. Life in the neighborhood was blissfully calm, without Karen breathing down everyone's necks. The community felt freer than it had in years. Neighbors waved to each other. Kids played outside without fear of being fined for noise violations. Even the air seemed lighter. Ethan enjoyed his cabin in peace, fishing at dawn, chopping wood at dusk, his gate standing tall like a silent guardian. But peace never lasts forever. One evening, Just as the sun dipped behind the trees, a sleek black SUV rolled up to Ethan's gate. The tinted window slid down, and there she was, Karen. Her once perfect hair was frazzled, her designer clothes wrinkled, but her eyes sharp, vengeful, glared through the steel bars like daggers. "You think you've won, don't you?" she hissed. Ethan sipped from his mug, leaning casually against the gate. "From the looks of it, I'd say I have." Karen's lip curled. "The board may have removed me, but I still have friends in high places. You embarrassed me, Ethan. You stole everything from me, and I don't forgive." Ethan didn't flinch. "You did that to yourself, Karen. You should have left me alone." Her SUV door opened and she stepped out, slamming it behind her, papers clutched in her hand. She held them high like a weapon. "Guess what I found?" she sneered. "Your cabin isn't even zoned for permanent residency. Technically, you're trespassing on county land, and once I bring this to the council, you'll be out on the street." Ethan's stomach tightened. She wasn't bluffing. Karen had always been obsessed with loopholes. But then, he smiled. "Funny you mentioned zoning, because I've already been to the county office. Turns out, the land was grandfathered in decades ago. My family's name is on that deed, which means this cabin is protected." He pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. A moment later, a video began to play, recorded earlier that week. It showed a county official confirming the exemption, Ethan's property, rights ironclad. Karen's face went white. "You," she whispered, "you set me up." Ethan shrugged. "No, you set yourself up. I just made sure the truth came out." The neighbors had begun to gather, drawn by the commotion. Dozens of them stood behind Ethan's gate, phones raised, recording everything. Karen spun, realizing she was once again the star of a public humiliation. "Turn those off. This is harassment. I'll sue every single one of you," she screamed, her voice cracking. But the more she shouted, the more people laughed. For the first time, Karen wasn't feared, she was pitied. Finally, Ethan opened the gate, just enough to step forward. He stopped inches from her, his voice low and steady. "It's over. Karen, you don't run this community anymore. You don't run me. Walk away, before you lose what little you have left." For a heartbeat, she stood frozen, eyes blazing with hate. Then, with a furious scream, she tore the papers in half, threw them to the ground, and stormed back into her SUV. Tires screeched as she sped off into the night. The neighbors erupted into cheers. "About time. Good riddance, Karen. You're a legend, Ethan." He raised a hand, quieting them with a small grin. "Nah, I'm just a man who wanted to be left alone." But deep inside, he felt the weight lift. At last, Karen was finished. Truly finished, and for the first time since he moved into the cabin, Ethan finally had peace. The night Karen screeched out of the community in her black SUV. I thought they'd seen the last of her, but whispers began circulating within days. Word spread that Karen had been reported for HOA fund misuse, not only by Ethan, but by multiple other residents, emboldened by his courage. Investigators started digging. Within weeks, the truth was undeniable. Fraudulent invoices, personal vacations billed as community development, luxury furniture charged to HOA accounts. Karen had bled the neighborhood dry for years. When the county attorney finally pressed charges, neighbors gathered at the clubhouse again, not to bicker, but to celebrate. Ethan, standing quietly in the back, watched as Karen's face appeared on the evening news, her mugshot plastered beside the headline, "Ex-HOA president arrested for embezzlement and fraud." She was finished. For Ethan, life changed in subtle but powerful ways. Neighbors who once kept their heads down now waved when they saw him. Families that had been bullied by Karen came by to thank him, bringing baskets of food, firewood, even fresh pies. One afternoon, Greg, the wiry board member who'd helped vote Karen out, approached Ethan at the cabin gate. "You know," Greg said with a grin, "we've restructured the HOA. It's democratic now. No more presidents, just a fair board. But between you and me, you're the reason we had the guts to do it. You should consider joining." Ethan chuckled. "Thanks, Greg, but I didn't fight Karen to join another committee. I just wanted peace." Greg nodded knowingly. "Fair enough, but if you ever change your mind, the door's open." The seasons turned. The lake sparkled in summer. The cabin glowed in autumn. Snow blanketed the pines in winter. For the first time in years, Ethan felt at home. No more fines. No more harassment. No more harassment. But fate had one last twist. Months later, while walking through town, Ethan spotted a familiar figure outside the courthouse. Karen. She wasn't in designer clothes anymore. Plain gray suit. Her hair, once perfectly styled, was streaked with stress. She saw him for a moment. Her eyes flickered with the same venomous glare as before. But then, it faded. She looked down, clutching her folder of court documents, and walked away without a word. Ethan watched her go, feeling no triumph, no anger, only a quiet sense of closure. Some battles, he realized, don't end with fireworks. They end with silence, and that silence was enough. Epilogue: Ethan's victory. On a cool spring morning, Ethan sat on his cabin porch, sipping coffee as the sun rose over the lake. A group of neighborhood kids ran past, laughing, chasing each other with sticks. Their parents waved from a distance. Ethan raised his mug in return. Life was simple. peaceful, exactly how he wanted it. He leaned back, smiling to himself. Karen thought she owned me, thought she could control me, but in the end, all she did was free me. The gate stood tall, the cabin stood firm, and Ethan finally had what Karen could never take: his freedom.